Hi, my name's Godfrey Nolan, and today we're going to talk about calling GPT-5 via the API. It's been over a year since we first looked at the basics of calling a ChatGPT model via the API. So with the release of GPT-5, thought it would be a good time for a refresher, and also to see how the API has changed in the last year. And it has changed. It's changed. I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse, but it's just changed, and we'll see how it's all together. So here is our quick agenda. So we'll talk about the news this month. So the main event is looking at the OpenAI API and how to call GPT-5 via the API. And then next month we are going to look at computer use agents, because when I was doing this, I saw that you could call them from Python now. So that's really interesting. And I've been playing with computer use agents for a while. So basically, if I was going to say what CUA is, it's basically ChatGPT is doing the web browsing and button clicks for you. So we're going to look at that, doing that via the API next month. It is not currently supported by GPT-5, but I don't think that matters. It probably will be by the time we do the talk. So there were two big announcements in the world of LLMs and OpenAI, and they arrived one after the other in early August. So the first one was that OpenAI released two open source LLMs. So that's GPT OSS, the 120 billion parameters, and the GPT OSS 20 billion parameters. So that's the first open source LLM that ChatGPT has released since GPT-2 in 2019. And then I did want to say that open source in the LLM world doesn't mean the same as open source in the computer science world. It doesn't mean giving away the code. It means they're giving away the weights so that basically you can build your own version. So you can replicate what they're doing. And if you want to understand how to do that, we talked about that in Build Your Own LLM, which we did as a previous meetup. But you can also download the GPT OSS version and run it offline. It's 13 gigs, so it'll take a while to download and run. But I'll show you in a second how to do it. It's really straightforward. And the second big announcement, which is the focus of our talk, is the release of GPT-5. So I was looking for something to do for this month. And I thought, what a great time to look back at how to call APIs. So all the stuff I do is on Windows. I'm not a Mac person. I'm not a Linux person. I think the vast majority of people are using Windows. So typically when I do my calls, it's from Windows. If I'm doing anything a bit more adventurous, it's going to be using PowerShell or sometimes Windows WSL, Windows Systems Linux. But if you want to download GPT OSS, there is a tool called Olama, and I have put the URL in the resources, and I will share the slides on the meetup discussion later today or tomorrow. And then you run this command, which is Olama run GPT OSS 20 B, which is for 20 billion parameters. And after about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on your connection, you basically get a MS-DOS version of the web ChatGPT. And you can ask it all sorts of questions, the same as you would. So it's super cheap. It's got an awful lot of information. I wouldn't say it's as good as ChatGPT-5 or even ChatGPT-4, but there's a huge amount of info in here. And it's you can also call it via the API too as well. So it's a really cheap way and a really contained way and secure way and private way of being able to play with LLMs. You can also do this with Llama from Meta, and there's lots of other ones out there if you go to Hugging Face. So something worth checking out if you're interested. So alama.org is the first place I would start. Okay. So GPT was released to what can only be described as mixed reviews. So let's take a look at some of the positive and negative reactions. Firstly, the highlights. So the experts lauded GPT's technical capabilities, its reasoning, coding, and accuracy, so noticeable gains. Some benchmarked it with PhD level performance in math, multimodal tasks, and logic. Multimodal would be imaging, because I don't think you can do audio. No, you can't do audio with this yet. And then there's this efficiency and infrastructure advancement. So basically what that means is that if you go to the web, especially in the first few days, you call GPT-5, but you're not seeing GPT-4 GPT-4 Nano, you're not seeing Omni or whatever else. So there's a dynamic routing that's going on that GPT-5 will allocate queries to the lighter or the deeper models, depending what you're asking for. It can also handle huge context windows and lowers resource use. However, on the API side, we still have access to everything. So that's one of the reasons why I love playing with the API. We can access models all the way back to GPT 3.5 Turbo. So if you are wanting to use GPT-4 Omni or something else, you can still use them via the playground or via the API. OpenAI did quickly reinstate some legacy models for paid users. And then they also fixed a couple of bugs. There was they patched the auto switcher bug that affected quality. And then they also, in response to criticisms that GPT-5 felt too formal, a warmer, friendlier personality update rolled out aimed at restoring emotional resonance. So basically, there were people who were complaining that it's just it's very stuffy now, and they were getting attached to GPT-4 and didn't like what was going on. So here are some of the negative reactions. So many users complained GPT-5 lacked the warmth and friendliness of earlier models, such as GPT-4 Omni. Descriptions like flat, robotic, or corporate beige zombie, I love that one, were common, especially people who relied on AI for companionship. The sudden removal of older models without warning, coupled with that auto switch bug that I talked about, left many users frustrated and dissatisfied. And then, despite claims that this was PhD level transformative gains, this is very much of an incremental progress in ChatGPT-5. Many people have said that with the current design of the transformers and everything else that we're using, we're kind of getting just incremental gains, not the huge gains that we've got over the last few years. So maybe we're going to get some massive change in architecture that will help. But for the moment, we're not seeing these huge gains anymore. And that's across the board, not just for OpenAI. And then trust and reliability gaps. So some users noticed inconsistent performance, logical missteps, or simple errors, raising questions about GPT-5 stability and trustworthiness. I will say that the one thing that stood out to me as I was preparing the slides is just how complex my API calls in Python are getting, especially for some of the newer features in GPT-5. So that when I started looking at it, I was thinking, yeah, this is the perfect time to start kicking the tires and seeing what's going on. Okay, so I am going to give away pretty much how old I am now. But my first year of college, people were still using punch cards for Fortran programming. I kid you not. That may be because it was in Ireland and we're a bit backward there when it comes to computer science, but that's pretty bad. But honestly, I feel really lucky that I've been alive in this time period. So I've gone all the way from things like punch cards to where we are today, which is just amazing. But I have noticed a trend over the years that humans repeat the same pattern over and over again. So we just can't seem to help ourselves from taking something simple and then increasing the complexity so it's impossible for one person to know how everything works because there are just too many options, libraries and APIs to choose from. So I asked ChatGPT to give me this image. I said, hey, tell me all the things that have happened with Android. So I've been programming Android back since the early Eclipse days. And, so basically what's happened is Java's been replaced by Kotlin, Eclipse has been replaced by Android Studio, XML has been replaced by Compose, SQLite's kind of been replaced by Room, and the list just goes on and on. So in my career, I've seen this thing happen over and over again. And when Java first came out, basically you could learn everything in a weekend, and then it became so complicated it was replaced by Kotlin. And we saw the same with iOS, so Objective-C was replaced by Swift. I'm pretty sure I think we're going to need a replacement for Kotlin, because that's too is becoming a very broad landscape. And just to kind of like re-emphasize my point, and I'll get off this rant now in a second. So it really looks like OpenAI is doing the same. So here's the ChatGPT changelog for 2024. We're coming up on October Dev Days, so there's going to be a ton of things I expect happening in October 2025. But you can see that all the things that I didn't know that for Omni was called Chive at one stage. So yeah, well, I guess there's, we are definitely in the growth period of increasing complexity for ChatGPT. So my advice is to get them on board the train as soon as possible, as it's going to keep getting harder and harder to use. But But if you're in it now, then I think you're basically you should be okay. But you want to make sure that you keep up with whatever the latest changes are. So I took this image from some slides I did a year or so ago. I was teaching a course at Kettering on how to use the Python API. So this is the OpenAI API. This is the OpenAI API playground. So it's not to be confused with the ChatGPT web interface. So hopefully as developers, you've seen this, or if not, you can see its platform, openai.com. So we have all the usual elements that you would see from ChatGPT. So you have a system message. So you put your information in here saying you were a helpful assistant. You have your user message. This is what me as a user will enter. And then the assistant is whatever the response is. And then over on the right-hand side, we can choose the temperature. So that's basically saying how deterministic we want the answers to be. So the lower it is, it's going to be the same response every time. The higher it is, it's going to be a bit more randomized. We can also see things like top P, which is an alternative temperature. It's like this is setting a rule that the AI can only choose from the best possible options. So if you set top P to 0.1, it's like telling the AI you can only pick from the top 10% of your best guesses. And then we have some penalty parameters, which are, if you raise them, it's basically stopping ChatGPT from repeating itself, something that I could probably use. So here's the code for calling GPT 3.5. All of the code that I'm going to show tonight is on my GitHub. So it's github.com/GodfreyNolan, one word, and it's just GPT-5. I will post the slides with all the resources and all the links after we do this talk, so you can find it there. But if you want to, let's just get out of this for a second. If you want to play with it, I have everything is up here. So this is the URL if you want to see what we're doing. So here are the different examples of what we're going to talk about tonight. So the first one is a basic call. Let's see if I can make that a bit bigger. This is using the chat completions. It is using 3.5. And then I'm just asking it the same thing that I asked it in the playground. I don't want to go into the playground yet. I want to talk about that in a second. If you want to run the code, so what I've done is I've got a requirements, which has two libraries, one for OpenAI and one for config. So I import you can use a .env, I just use config because it's what I've used for a lot of the time. You set up your own environment, and we can run our app.py, which is using the GPT 3.5 Turbo. Hopefully I don't, yeah, oh great, it worked, excellent. Okay, so that's the first one. Let's go back to where we were then. Okay, so that's, as I was saying, if you're using the API, you don't have the same problems that everybody else had with all your old models going away. We're just using the same ones. This is the wrong way around, isn't it? Okay. Okay, so the new playground. So this is what it looks like if you go into the playground now, and I'll show you this in a second. It looks quite a bit different. So the model parameters are now underneath the whatever model that you're choosing. So whatever you're choosing, GPT-5 or one of the earlier legacy ones, if we have access. And then we have new parameters, such as we have the reasoning effort and verbosity, and we'll talk about those in a second. We have a bunch of tools that we can use. So just like on the ChatGPT web interface, where it says things like, do you want to create an image? Do you want to search the web? We can do the same things within here. The developer message has replaced the system message. So they've just changed what the name is. It probably makes more sense because system message and assistant I would always find confusing. So I don't have a problem with that. And then here we have prompt messages. So we can now start adding different variables, and we can put our variables in here and they'll show up in the prompt messages. The temperature, the top beat parameters are gone, although they're still being used internally by GPT-5. And I do know that that's the way that it's working because we have, you can see it in some of the output and the responses that it still tells you what the temperature is and what the top P is. So under the covers, it's still there, but you can't actually call it from the API anymore. Okay, so here is the call the similar call that we had before. So this is where we had with py. So right at the end, I've got here the different parameters that are passing in with the API. And then if we do this with now the GPT-5, so I'm just changing what the model is. I'm now saying I have a developer message and a user message. And then we have these two things at the bottom. So we have verbosity and reasoning effort. So as you know, if you played with ChatGPT recently, you can see that it's thinking all the time. So reasoning effort is basically saying you have low, medium, or high. It's going to spend a lot of time on whatever your question is based on what that level is. And then the verbosity is the same, low, medium, high. So if you want something within if you just want a small paragraph, if you want several paragraphs, or you want like a page, you will have the low, medium, or high in verbosity. And then it just prints out the same way as it done in the past. So let me just run that really quick. It's going to take a bit longer, and it's got a slightly better answer. So cogito ergo sum. I think therefore I am. Okay, so if we go back into here now, so this is our playground. So one of the cool things that we have is we have a couple of examples that ChatGPT have given us for how to use the playground. And I would recommend, if you haven't done this much before, using the playground. And the reason I do this is because if you go in here and click on these three buttons, you can see where the code is. So this is giving you the code for how you would do this call in Python. And all that I did different was I just added the OpenAI key here. So you'll have to, obviously, have to go get your API key. So if you haven't got your API key, you have to go here and then go over, get an API key over here. And then you have to pass that in before this will work. Just for those who've never used this before. Okay, so this is my first example. So it's great. So it's giving me a trip planner. It's giving me a developer message, same as the old system message. So using the provided city information to provide a structured trip plan, be concise and use bullets to outline a plan for each of the days, explaining why it's interesting. So I am going to do Dublin, Ireland, my hometown. I'm going to say for 5 days. And it's going to pass those variables in here. We have these variables here. We have a web search. We can also add other tools, which I will talk about a little bit later. We also have these GPT parameters. So we have whether it's a text or a JSON format. We want the reasoning effort is minimal, low, or high. Minimal mean it's not really going to do anything. And then we have verbosity, which is low, medium, and high. And few other things. So we have tool choice, so we can force it to use web search preview, but typically I just use it in auto. It'll figure out itself what it needs to use. So if you tell it to go plan a trip, it's going to want to use the web to do that. It's going to take a little bit to do that. So let's have that cooking in the background. And as you can see, it's creating a Dublin trip plan. It's pretty good, actually. It picked up on the Book of Kells is what a lot of people go to, but they're doing restructuring on the amazing library that's in the background, so I picked that up too as well. So it's pretty good for what it's doing. Okay, where are we? I need to change this again. I don't know why it keeps doing this. So we click on the 3 dots. We just looked at that, and then we have this choice where we can do code. We can see the history of whatever it is that our chats were, but this other thing as well where we have responses. So there are 2 types of communication that you can have via the API when you're calling the API. You can have a chat completion, which is what I just showed you, or you can have a responses. So responses gives you access to lots more things, like you can do optimizing what you're trying to do. It also gives you access to a lot more of the tools. So that's kind of like the de facto standard that everybody wants to use today. So as chat completions API does not support prompts, variables, reasoning summaries, file search, web search, image generation, code interpreter, and MCP server tools. Switching will remove all the reasoning items and any unsupported tools in the playground. So basically what it's telling you is that you're not doing reasoning. Now, I don't think that's true, because I think we just saw that in action. with the chat completions. But my recommendation would be to definitely see if you can use the responses. Okay, it is a slightly different call in the Python. So in this case, instead of being chat dot, sorry, I got to go back to where it is because I never remember this. So client.chat.completions.create. So what it is now is it is client.responses.create, and then we have a couple of other things we can put in there. We can do store equals true, which means it's going to store your historical questions. Now, this is really important from Python, and it's one of the reasons why I always use responses, is because if you use the chat completions, there is no history of the questions that you've asked. So basically what you have to do is you have to store all your answers and pass them in each time to the client chat completions, so that it has a record of all the things that have happened in the conversation. So it's stateless. So client responses, on the other hand, is stateful, which is amazing. So that means basically we can store the responses, we can access the responses by the ID, and we can pass them in each time. Okay, so just to show you that that's actually working. So this is app 2 now. So this is using GPT-5 again. I've just changed this to client.responses from what it was before. We have store equals true, and I'm just going to run this real quick. Pausing to let somebody else in. Okay. And then basically what I did was, if we go back to what I showed you before, so it came up with my nice little 5-day, it only thought for 19 seconds, which is great. That's probably because I was using the responses, but if you're using the chat completions, usually comes back in about 20 seconds. Maybe it picked up, but historically, the first time I ran this, it took 3.5 minutes to actually run. And I did set the verbosity and the effort to medium. So it's saying, okay, go to Trinity College, do the Viking tour, go to the Liberties. You ever do go to Ireland? This is what I would do, take the Howth Cliff path loop. That's tourists never seem to do it. It's the best thing to do in Dublin. Okay, that's my, outside of API, that's my tip for the day. Okay, so if I want to see the code, like I said, I go in here, I see what the code is, I copy the code, and I move it across to VS Code. I don't want to know what the assistant messages were, because maybe I just want to run this myself multiple times. So we have our developer message, we have our user message, which is what my question is. And then we do the tool, which is web search preview, and then it's going to store equals true in case we want to do something else. And we have our effort is low because I want it to go fast, and the verbosity is medium because I want to get a fair amount of information back. Yeah, I messed up here. What did I do? Oh yeah, that's right. I was trying to be cute. So as you can see, running from Python is pretty cool. It's for if you have any development experience at all, it's something that just lends itself to tying together multiple different things and allow you to kind of automate as many things as you want to internally in your office, and that's what we're using it all the time. The one caveat I will tell you is that do not ask ChatGPT to generate the code for you, because it's appallingly bad at understanding the modern way of calling ChatGPT. It will have no idea how to do a GPT-5 call. So if you asked ChatGPT to do it, you're not going to get anywhere. So the best way to do it, like I said, is to go into the playground, figure out what it is that you're trying to do using this version, and then asking it to just ask it for the code and tidy up the code based on what you're trying to do. But if you go to ChatGPT and say, hey, give me the code to do this call, it's not going to work. So I recommend avoiding it at all costs. Okay, where were we? Let's go back to where we were. All right, so GPT isn't fully baked yet. This is the kind of thing that happens. Stuff comes out, and then after a while, it gets better and better. other things come and other things may disappear. So if you look at what's supported in the docs, it currently works with text and images, but it doesn't work with audio. There's also there's a chat completions endpoint, there's a responses endpoint, and there's a batch endpoint. So that means if you have lots of different calls, you can get them to run overnight at a cheaper price. But there are no embeddings, assistance, or speech yet. Kind of wouldn't expect it because they're usually different models anyway. So we can stream, we can do function calls, structured outputs, just JSON, but we can't do fine tuning. So in the past, a lot of what people have done when they're using models is that they want to fine tune it for their own particular use case. So we can't do that quite yet with GPT, but I'd expect that to come back later. And then the tools, so we have web search, which I just showed you. We have file search, we have image generation, code interpreter, and MC. Okay, somebody is asking a question. Let me get back there. Okay, see you later. And we will look at each of those different tools as we continue, hopefully without my phone failing. So we go back to the playground. It's going to give us a lot of hints about how to write our API calls. So unlike the ChatGPT web interface, we can call any of the GPT variants because there's more than one. So there's GPT-5, there's Nano, there's Mini. There are checkpoints that have been out there. There's also a lot of legacy ones if you want to play around with that too as well. There's lots of different sample outputs. We just looked at the trip planner. So there's an image generator, there's a code debugger, which is really cool. So if you basically just give it a file, it will tell you what's wrong with the file, or it'll tell you how to improve the file. Okay. The trip planner, like I said, uses a couple of variables. It uses a web search tool. So if we click on the parameters, we can see that we have the text format, which can be the output format, which can be text or JSON. Maybe you want to put it in JSON because this is going to be a pipeline, so you're going to pass it into something else. The reasoning and verbosity, and then the tool choice we set to auto. You can explicitly tell it to use a tool, but and store the logs if you wanted to as well. Okay, so what tools do we have? I have said earlier that we can't use computer use. So function calling. So we can call custom code to give the model access to additional data and capabilities. There are a couple of really cool things that they introduced in function calling that I will show you later. Basically, it allows you to add a grammar so that you can output, depending on what the input is, you can output a time. You can output as a SQL statement. You can output it as a SQL statement for particular types of SQL. So like Microsoft SQL Server or Postgres or SQLite, it will do that for you. You can do web search. We just looked at that. A few months ago, we looked at MCP servers. So that's the Model Context Protocol servers. So a lot of people are using those to basically front end other data sources. So that could be a database. It could be an API. We're just going to use it for a really simple one for Dungeons and Dragons. But you can connect to Zapier. You can connect to Stripe. You can connect to SharePoint, Gmail, all sorts of other things. File search, so you can upload files and it'll do a search on you. Image generation, it will generate images as well, and that's one of the examples, not computer use. So okay, if we want to add an MCP server, basically what we do is we click on the plus add button to see the list of tools. We will return to the custom tool, that's the new one, which is basically a modified version of the function, which is super cool. Okay. All right, so this was the trip planner that we worked on. And then this is the code that I ran to get it. As I said, I changed it to low, just didn't want to take it too long. Okay, so let's look at the overview of the new features. We talked about them kind of like generally. So I'm going to talk about all the new features, and then I'm going to give a couple of examples about MCP and the context-free grammars, and then we'll see where we go from there. Okay, so we have the verbosity parameter, so controls how expansive the model replies. So low, terse, medium, balanced, high, verbose, so used for teaching, that sort of thing. We have the free-form function calling, so that will allow you to create code in different languages. So say I'm using Python a lot, but say you're not a Python programmer and you want to do it in C++ or Java, you can output it into each of the different languages. You can do it in Swift. You can do different types of SQL databases. And it will do all sorts of other things for you too as well. It understands a lot of the coding tools that we're using. There are context-free grammars. So context-free grammars go back a long time. So in the early days of writing compilers, probably even now, but basically what we would do is there were tools that came at Unix. For example, the earliest ones were called Lex and Yak. And what they did is they tokenized whatever the input was, and they have a grammar which would change take whatever the input was, say, for example, a simple Python file, turn it into tokens, and then those tokens were turned into things like assembly code or some sort of intermediate format, which could then be turned into assembly code. And that's really how early compilers work. Because LLMs are so token-based, it's not surprising that they live and breathe context-free grammars. So when you are inputting JSON or outputting JSON, under the covers, there's a CFG, which is basically making sure that whatever format you're putting in a JSON is the correct format, and then making sure whatever the output is in a JSON format. So now what we've got is we have access to CFGs, so we can create whatever grammars we want. And I'll show a few examples of what we're going to do that, how we're going to do that later on in this meetup. And then minimal reasoning. A lot of times you don't want it to go and reason. You just basically want a quick answer. You don't want to wait, 30 seconds. Maybe this is something that's part of a workflow. Maybe it's connected to a website. The worst thing that you want to do is to get the person waiting 15 minutes, or you have to email it back to them. So that's why we would use minimal reasoning. Okay, so low for verbosity would be 560 tokens. That's another reason why you might want to use low, because it's going to be less expensive. Medium, 850 tokens, and high is almost 1300 tokens. So depending on what you want to do for different use cases, so if you want detailed documentation, you want to be going for the high. If you want, it will do different code generations. So it will do low code generations. So tight code, or it will do much more expansive stuff with lots of comments, depending on what you choose. So verbosity and code generation. So low verbosity produces minimal functional code with no extra comments, and then medium will add some comments, and high verbosity, it's basically production ready code with best practice tips, lots of reasoning, lots of information that project managers would want, and not necessarily coders. Sorry, no offense, project managers. Okay, GPT can now send raw text payloads to your custom tool without wrapping the data in JSON using this new tool type custom. And this is a little bit confusing, but we'll show a couple of examples, so it won't be too bad. So there's the examples that I'm going to show are you give it a text saying what you want it to do. So you want to say, hey, I want to do a hello world, and it will give you the Python string for what that hello world would be, or you could ask it for, can you give me the time format in, I don't know, whatever the Europeans want to use, or whatever the Canadians want to use, and it will give you that format. So plus it's a little bit confusing because it does it under the cover, so it's not like you're writing the code, you're just basically telling it what to do. It understands what you're saying, and it'll give you back the whatever it is format that you've asked for in the format that you've requested. Multi-language code generation. I think this is so cool. So you can ask it to generate code in Python, C++, or Java. So this allows for, like when Java came out, the whole big thing was it was cross-platform development. So this, if you want to learn different languages and you're used to working in Java, you haven't done any C++ since your early days of college, this is a great way to get back into whatever the different stack is that you're trying to do. People will still use C++ for fast compilation, for real-time processing, something that Java's pretty good at, but it's still C++, still has the edge. Okay, and then we talked about context-free grammars. So a context-free grammar is a collection of production rules that define which strings belong to a language. So CFGs serve as their contracts that force the model to omit only strings that the grammar accepts. Okay, it's kind of a little bit complicated. So get back to my compiler example. So you're trying to compile your Python code. So basically what the compiler does is it recognizes each of the different tokens that are the commands that you have, whether that's print, whether that's import. It recognizes each of those different tokens, and it passes them on to the CFG, and the CFG will basically do something with them. So it will print something based on you printing, it'll import something based on you importing, or it will create the instruction to do that. And then, so we don't really have access to Lex and Yak or any of the other kind of CFGs that are out there, but we do have access to Lark, and Lark is just one example that we can do. So if you do have a very complicated language structure that you want to impose on your ChatGPT, then this is the way to go. A lot of people, we use regex, so we have a regex example then too as well. Okay. So here's just one example of why you would use CFGs. So what they do is they excel at enforcing dialect-specific syntax rules. So their SQL, there's ANSI SQL, which is the definition of what SQL is, but most of the SQL implementations don't follow the ANSI SQL to the nth degree. So on the left-hand side, you have a Microsoft SQL Server, which is basically saying, give me the top customers, orders, order date, where the total amount is greater than $500 and the order date is between 2025. So you can do select top with SQL Server, but with PostgreSQL, Postgres, you don't really do the same thing. You basically say limit 5 instead of doing top 5. So a lot of times I've started off using something like MySQL, and then we've had to upgrade to, or SQLite, and we've had to upgrade to SQL Server, we've had to upgrade to Oracle, and that's always a real pain to be able to make sure that it's following the same spec. And this provides a really good way of being able to get over the hump, so we'll convert it for you. So MCP, so Model Context Protocol, so it gives you access to the outside world. So you can have OpenAI connect to Gmail, Google Calendar. Here we have Zapier. So Zapier is a third-party application which has hundreds and hundreds of different applications behind it. So if you can connect to Zapier, then you can connect to the hundreds of different applications, and that from a CRM, or it could be anything to, or just even Stripe, like a payment server. Sorry, here's somebody trying to get in. Okay. In the example, I'm just going to borrow the one that came from MCP and, from OpenAI. I'm going to just connect to this Dungeons and Dragons server, which is going to roll the dice for me. So I know that this is the URL. It is DMCP server SSE. If you don't know anything about MCPs, hugely recommend going back and looking at the MCP talk that we did. Two of them, no, one of them we did probably about 3 or 4 months ago now. The blog is up on the website if you need to see that too as well. You can create your own. So if you want to connect to, we're doing it currently. We did it with Zoho CRM, but we're also doing a lot more now because Zoho has just released an MCP. So we're trying to get into that a bit more. So basically you could, talk to ChatGPT, which would then talk to the MCP and do whatever you need to do in the background. So it's natural language processing, which turns into actions on a real server, and you don't have to call the API. Okay, so once you do that, basically what you want to do is you want to add the actions. So you have to say, in this case, the server will respond to you with the actions that it has. In this case, it just rolls a dice. You want to make sure that you add that. Okay, and then I just realized I repeated this real quick. So here's what it looks like in the playground. So basically I said add tool, went through that process I just showed you, adding the DMCP server. I said, please, I gave it this command, which means roll a 2 4-sided dice, add the results together, and then add one more to the total, and it randomized it and came back with 5. So you can see here that it's listing the tools, thinking for a second, it's rolling, and then just the server is giving me back this answer. So it's just a pretty simple example of connecting, a pretty simple example for connecting to the outside world using MCP. And then the coolest thing of all is you can then go over to the code here, see how it connected. That can become really make your life a hell of a lot easier if you're doing any authentication with these, because it will give you the Python code for doing the authentication. I will say that you will have to refactor the code to get it to work, to get it to be a little more neater. A lot of the code that it generates, especially when it comes to MCP, is pretty verbose. Even when I want something neat and tidy, so a lot of times you'll have to hack the code to get something to work. In this case, what I've done is I'm using responses API. I'm saying the model is GPT-5. I'm saying the tool is type MCP. The server label is DMCP. Here's where the description is. Here's where the URL is. I don't require approval. I don't want, because a lot of times what it'll do is it'll say, "Are you sure you want to make this call?" I don't. I'm sure I want to make it. The allowed tools that I have is roll. So then what I do is my input then is just roll this, and then it'll give me the output is. So let's see how that works. Again, these are up on the website on GitHub. Let's run this real quick. Hopefully I don't have any issues with my phone not being able to connect to this. No, it worked. Okay, great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about code generation. So I'm going to walk through these, and then I'm going to go back and then do the actual code. So the first one that we're going to talk about is, so these are custom tools. So if we go down and choose the last option, we say custom, and the tool in this case is code generation. So for my custom tool, all that I have to say is that give it a name, which I'm just, a random name, code exec, and a description. And I tell it executes arbitrary Python code. So my input is use the code exec tool to print hello world to the console. And if I run this, it will give me print hello world. So let me try this real quick. So I'm not doing anything. Basically, what I'm doing is describing what a tool is rather than creating a tool. But ChatGPT and OpenAI is smart enough to understand what I'm trying to do, and it gives me the Python code that I asked for in the first place. So that just absolutely blows my mind. Okay, so then the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to have one of the Lark examples. And so this grammar is defined here. So it might be a little bit hard to understand if you've never done if you haven't done a compilers course. So basically what you have is, let somebody else in. You have the start of the expression, you define what the expression is, and this is basically saying that we have addition and multiplication that we're doing. We're importing the ability to do integers, and I'm basically saying I now have this custom tool. What is the custom tool? We're going to call it math expressions. It creates valid mathematical expressions. The format is a type grammar. We're going to use Lark to define the grammar. So the syntax is defined up here. And we are basically saying, use the math expression tool that we just defined to add 4 plus 4. And basically what it's going to do is it's just going to give us what 4 plus 4 would be if it was a mathematical expression. This case is different from the print hello world because we have actually defined what our mathematical tool is doing. But you could, if you think about it, you could use the same for SQL definitions. Basically, that's what it's trying to do. So in this case, we're using another grammar, but we're doing it as a regex. So regular expressions are basically, we're setting up how we would have a date format in this case. So we're creating a new tool. It's called the timestamp tool. So it's going to save a timestamp in a date, time, in a 24-hour format. We are giving it a August 7, 2025 at 10 a.m. So give me this back in a date and time in 24-hour format. Don't worry too much about the regex. I will say the one thing that I found at very early days that ChatGPT and OpenAI was great at was doing regular expressions. So you could basically say, give me a regular expression that for a timestamp tool, and I would give you something similar to this. Okay, so we run this. So it'll just basically give me back what the time is. So August 7th. Oh, just hold it out like that. Okay, didn't really do much in that case. Okay, so then the last thing, what I want to do is a SQL example. So in this case, we're going to call it SQL Runner. It is of type custom. The only description we're going to give it is say executes raw SQL and returns results. So the model can emit text that the tool receives directly. So raw SQL. How your backend receives and executes the model tool payload depends on your web app runtime. So I am going to ask it to do fetch the average order value for last month and return a SQL query only. So the people who want to run SQL are never the developers. They're the business analysts, they're the business folks, they're the marketing folks who are I have no idea how to speak SQL. So this gives them ability to have a query that can run in the back end based on whatever their request is. So to ask me as a SQL developer, I want to fetch the average order value for last month and return a SQL query only. As a marketing person, that's simply not going to happen. But as ChatGPT, if I have access to the database, I can now run it perfectly well. Plus, I can also tell it, as we saw earlier, to do it with if I want to use Postgres or if I want to use SQL Server or SQLite. Okay. I think we're almost done. Excuse me, almost done now. I'm amazed my phone hasn't failed. Okay, so that's the one where we were doing the Python code. Here is the grammar that we're using for Lark. If you don't understand how Lark works, definitely would be worth asking ChatGPT to create something for you to explain the basics. But basically, it is a tokenizer that turns something into a format. And what we did here was we just asked it to turn 4 plus 4, the words, into 4 plus 4. Okay, I'm almost finished, so I'll answer your question in a second. And then we have save the timestamp. And again, we're using a grammar. This time it's a regex grammar. And the last one is the SQL CFG. Okay, I'm going to go through the resources, but I'm going to break out of this for a second. And I'll show you the different resources. And I'm going to answer the question because somebody asked a question. Yeah, what is your, can you put your question in the reach mail? Can you ask a question? What is your question? Do you want to put it in the chat? Can't hear you. Nope, not hearing you. Okay, so let me see what I can do here. Let me go to have a look and show you where the code is, and maybe we can get that question in a second. All right, so this is Olama. So this is the one that I use to run the open source one. So pretty cool. Really lightweight, although the models that you're going to download are not lightweight at all. Once you install that, you can basically run the Olama tools from the command line. This is the playground. So within the playground, we have all the documentation. So this is where I found out all the stuff about ChatGPT 5, what it supported, what it didn't support. We have all the different things. If you want to do the image generator, it's in here too as well. Again, what I would recommend is having a look at the code after it's doing this. It's a great way to learn what all the different things that you're using. Here it's using the web search preview tool and also the image generation tool. Okay, we all looked at that already. This is absolutely excellent cookbook. So if you go to the model, you'll see that there's two things here into the playground. You'll see this cookbook and forum. Cookbook have lots of different things for. They're kind of highlighting all the GPT-5 things, so prompting guide. The one that I like that is the new parameters and tools, which basically walks you through. So here are the examples for low, medium, and high. It'll also walk you through the free-form function calling for code exec with sandboxes, and then the context-free grammars that we talked about. Here is Lark if you want to get some more information about Lark, and then minimum reasoning where you just want to get an answer quick without having to do too much. I haven't really seen any updates in OpenAI Python on GitHub for their Python examples. Hopefully they'll get some updates in the next few months for ChatGPT 5. And then just finally, I have all of the code. If we go to ChatGPT 5 under my repo, putting all the examples I have here. So basically what you do is you want to run the requirements, make sure that's working. And then the different examples, the basic call 3.5, basic call 5, responses, the trip planner, the MCP call, and each of the different custom tools that I did at the end. Okay, so I did rattle that off really quick. I will be uploading the video. I know this live streamed, but we do a shorter video as well. And the slides, they should be uploaded sometime tomorrow. Has anybody got any questions? Or has anybody got any points about GPT-5 that I've missed that they'd like to talk about? I hear somebody try and say something.
Sure that isn't me. Nope. Thank you from Jake.
You're welcome, Jake. Hope you enjoyed it. As I said, the slides and stuff will be up tomorrow. If you haven't played much with the API, 100% recommend that you start doing it now, because this is only going to get more complicated. You'll find as you go that if you're not in it at an early stage, it just sometimes becomes way too complicated to try and access all the different parameters as the complexity just increases exponentially. So if you're going to do it, I would do it now, because GPT-6 comes around, or Dev Days in October. God knows what we're going to get access to. I can't wait, but if you haven't got into this yet, I'd recommend doing it now, because it's only get more complicated.
So
okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Brian, go for it.
So was there anything in the playground for doing, like, everyone's favorite application, RAG, or for being able to feed files or images in the playground?
Yeah. If I do this, look at that this way. Oh, I got this out this way. Oh. Basically, they're all in here. So
you're not sharing your screen.
No, let me share my screen. Thank you. Duh.
That's why I'm here. For that moment.
Okay. So what you see here is here are all the different things that you can do with ChatGPT. So forget GPT-5. Okay, hold on a second. So I got asked a question just to answer real quick. Is SQL Runner tool is used? This tool is something you implement or is available from ChatGPT API? It's available from the ChatGPT API. That's the coolest thing. They have this stuff already built into it, so you don't even have to worry about it. So do the SQL for me. Off it goes. There is an example on the parameters and tools that has a grammar for Microsoft SQL and for Postgres. So if you want to do something very specific, I would go to this one, and that will give you all the detail you need. But yeah, it's just amazing. All this stuff is just available for free. So you were talking about RAG, Brian. So basically what you would do at RAG is that you would, hold on a second. Basically what you do is you would upload whatever file it is you want, and it would be stored. You can create a vector store if you want to do embeddings. And you basically access that from your ChatGPT from your chat. So it doesn't work with 5. So you have to go back to 4. So where would be 4? And then what you basically do here is you would add a file search, and it would access the file storage, and then you would have access to the RAG. You can also do that from the API, but basically from the API, you have to find out what the ID of the vector store is. So this file ID, and then you can access the file ID by just calling the file ID. Maybe I should do that. I know I did it earlier in one of the earlier talks. So Brian, if you go back to one of the first months on one of the recordings or the PowerPoints, you'll see how we did it.
Right, and so I would suspect that it'll be added to 5 eventually. That's just kind of a fundamental thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So Reachmeal is asking, well, they're saying that their audio is not working, and asking if you accept recommendations. Asking about how to go about privatizing ChatGPT so that it can be used on a PC and can use the AI from my own system. Can you download? No, you can't, right?
Yes, you can.
You can, but not.
Well,
not
there's
the
a couple of things.
model.
You can right at the start, the GPT OSS. You can download that and run it locally and give access to anybody that you want, and you can call it via an API. So there's a few things you can do, Reachmeal. You can front end ChatGPT. You can create your own ChatGPT. Let's just go to ChatGPT. So you could basically say, oh yeah, there we go. That's a really good. First of all, here's how to run it locally. So that's a good URL. I'll post that tomorrow too as well. But you can basically ask ChatGPT, give me a web interface that looks like the ChatGPT web chat. And then when somebody does a chat, what you do is you connect that to the API to do one of these calls. Then you have to use your own API key. So that's the bad news, is it's going to use your API key. But I know a lot of people will do this because they want their families to have access to this, and they don't want their mom and dad to get charged. So basically, you can front end your own version of the ChatGPT web interface by just making the calls in the back end like this, and make this user a variable so that somebody can pass it in. So yeah, you can do that all the time, Reachmeal. And if you can't figure it out, Reachmeal, just send me an email or send me a message on Meetup. I'm more than happy to help you. And then this was the other thing, which was just posted, which I think is really cool. So yeah, there you go. How can I run it locally? There you go. There you go. So that's already got it. So if you want to do the chat, follow this guide, and you now have your free version of ChatGPT. It won't be as fast. That's the only problem. It's kind of slow to get these offline versions going because it's depending on how fast your computer is. And let's face it, even though this is running on a NVIDIA, this is not the fastest computer in comparison to what they're using in data centers.
Is it a reduced parameter model? Because I can barely run the 70B DeepSeek on my machine, and I have a.
It's 20 billion parameters instead of. There's 120 billion, but I'm just using the 20 billion. Let me see if I can run real fast.
And you don't find any degradation in the responses, in the quality?
No. I have to start PowerShell. Wait a second now.
Are you supposed to be sharing your screen?
I'm not there yet, so you're gonna have to wait. There we go. Yeah, you see, that's like, it's do, go get a coffee, come back when everything's running, and then say, this is the one I always do.
Tim Berners-Lee.
But, with the reasoning model takes forever anyway, so if you get used to it. Yep, so that's basically the way it works. If you want to call it by the API, I can show you how to call it. I'll put a link up maybe tomorrow. I don't know if you can hear in the background, but my computer is turning into a heat engine at this stage. It's going to take off any second.
can make some grilled cheese.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm
No,
hungry.
we can't hear it. I can't hear it anyway.
No.
This is
Yeah, it's
faster
about.
than my DeepSeek, but that's 70B, so you figure it's
Yeah,
not
this is
too
only the
bad.
20 billion, but you know, it depends on what. It all depends on what you're trying to do. So if you want data privacy, um, and you're not that worried about speed, then this is a great option. And price, it's free. How amazing is that?
You can
And
always buy
there's
you
lots
can
of
always buy
other
a faster
examples too.
computer. You can always buy a faster computer.
Yeah, you can always buy a fast computer, but then after a while, it's pennies to make API calls. So I just make the API call.
Don't tempt me, Brian. I've been hawking those 4090s on Newegg, just waiting for them to hit the lowest price.
I do, and Alama is just so cool. Like you can,
It is. It's
run.
fantastic.
I don't know which I do. I can't remember what the llama command is.
Yeah. So you could run a whole bunch of Hugging Face models on
Yeah,
Olama.
yeah, that's really what you're gonna do, but I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Sorry.
So like if for example, if you want to run something locally, but it's for a specific domain, there's a lot of models on Hugging Face that are built to task, right? So if you
Yep.
don't need generalized knowledge, you might be able to get a very small model that will do the job fantastically if you're trying to do something scoped.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm glad my phone didn't crap out and we got to do this, and hopefully my internet's working.
All right, everybody stay around for 1 second, or never mind. I'm going to end the stream with the QR code. You can check it out on the YouTube video later if you want to sign up for our newsletter and never miss an episode or meetup.